Our guest speaker this morning is the Reverend Amy Casteel. She and her husband Eric, if you could both stand as Amy comes, I don't know if you can see them, they co-pastor our Cedarway Free Methodist Church in Lansing, Michigan. Our theme, they also have served in the mission field, and Amy has been a resource person with our cross-cultural office and teaching cross-cultural sensitivity. Our theme is the world next door. We are all called to be missionaries where we live, where we work, and where we play. And the world has truly come next door. And all the skills required of missionaries over the centuries are required of us to learn a language, to value people who are different from us, to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations in order to be hospitable to the next person. About a year ago, I was attending our Continental Urban Exchange in Lansing, Michigan, Free Methodist Urban Workers Gathering for a conference, and Amy was one of our keynote speakers, and she spoke the same thing that she's going to share today. She hit a home run, and she added a few barbs with this challenge to notice the world that's come next door. And I ran up to her after that service. I said, Amy, I want you to come and be a part of our World Missions Month next February. And I'm just rejoicing that it was possible for you to come. So would you join me in welcoming Amy? And glad to have you, Eric.
Thank you for the warm welcome and the amazing worship this morning. What a great time. We're going to start this morning in Acts chapter 1, verse 8. If you will read this with me, if you don't know it by heart yet. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Now, you probably know this verse. You've probably heard it associated with missions before, right? It's pretty familiar. This is Luke's take on the Great Commission. Matthew had something a little bit different. He just said, to all nations, right? And now Luke gives us a list. And I wonder why that is. Okay, so the ends of the earth is a very dramatic thing. We have 3 daughters, and in our house, there's no end of drama. And this phrase, to the ends of the earth, can you just see a young girl shouting this? To the ends of the earth. So it seems very intense, and there's a reason why Luke chose these words to communicate this to us, but we'll get there. We live in an age of cultures that are blended now. Moving around and moving between cultures used to take a great deal of effort, right? Back in the day, a missionary, when they would leave the United States, would pack their belongings in their coffins and leave their goodbye letter to their family with their mission board, just in case something happened to them. They never intended to return. And every day as they would go to get their change of clothes on the ship, they would be using that coffin, touching what would be their death. And so it was a constant reminder, and it took weeks and months to make that trip. Now, when a missionary moves abroad, they get on a plane, and in a few hours, it's all over. It's much faster. And we interact with other cultures every day, don't we? In different ways. So it's not the same situation that it was even 100 years ago. So I know we've only known each other a few moments, but I'm going to ask you to indulge me and close your eyes for just a minute. And I want you to picture in your mind a foreigner. You got the picture? Their age? Got the background? Can you fill in? What are the buildings there? What modes of transportation do you see? Plants, animals? Get a good full picture. Got it? Okay, you can open your eyes now. We'll come back to that thought in about 10 minutes. No, seriously. When I ask Americans that question, to look and to think about a foreigner, they often picture someone in a setting like this. And if you start in the upper right-hand corner, that river is in Bangladesh. Beneath that is rural England. Next to that is the Masai Mara in Kenya. And above that is the Bordos, which is a community outside of San Pedro Sula, Honduras. We tend to put foreigners, people we want to go minister to, in rural settings with little education and little resources, right? But the reality is, over half of the world's population of 7 billion people now lives, over 51% now live in cities, and that number is growing. The trend is increasing. So when you meet someone who's from another culture, they're far more likely to come from a setting like this than the previous thought. This is London on your upper or your lower right, Kampala, San Pedro Sula, and Dhaka. They are places of great diversity. There's different age groups living in the city. As you can see in the picture from London, I love this picture because it's got the modern office buildings right in front of a cathedral. And you have the old and the new in the architecture, but you also have old and new in attitudes. You have different socioeconomic groups. You have amazing diversity in backgrounds in a city. So cities are strategic places for ministry. And that's how Paul, we know that, right? Paul the apostle, strategically placed his churches when he planted churches around Eastern Europe, or excuse me, the Eastern Mediterranean. When he did that in cities. And he typically picked cities that were in international trade areas. Why do you think that was? One of the famous couples that he partnered with was Priscilla and Aquila. Well, they had made 2 international moves before they even met Paul. And they made at least 2 more that we know about in the Bible. They were instrumental in 3 of the churches in the New Testament. Why would Paul partner with international business people to spread the gospel? I think there's something we can learn there. Paul also recruited people along the way, right? He was always picking up poor and wandering strangers and training them and sending them out. Well, one of the most famous ones we have in the Bible is Timothy. Why do you suppose he picked Timothy? To spread the gospel, to be a disciple of his, to be a disciple of Christ, to train him up in the ministry. Well, Timothy grew up in a cross-cultural home. He had a mother and grandmother who were Hebrew, so he probably spoke Hebrew with grandma. And he had a father who spoke what? Greek. His father was Greek. So he's in a cross-cultural home. But guess what? They lived on a trade route. They lived on a Roman road. And so was there Latin spoke in the marketplace? Sure. They also had a local language. And we know that he was part of that local language and part of that local community because they gave testimony to Paul about Timothy. So that's 4 languages in one guy. How many of us speak 4 languages? Not one of us. Okay, well, I'm in good company. How many of us have grew up in a cross-cultural home where there was more than one culture? Oh, good, good. All right, so we have 1 person who could be in Paul's training classes. That's it. No, I'm just kidding. So no, Paul was much more open than that. But I'm making a point here. Cities are strategic, and people with cross-cultural skills are strategic partners in ministry. So why do I point that out? Because we have to be intentional as we share the gospel across cultures. And it's not just to poor people, it's also to people who come from places like this. So last year in 2014, there were 51 million people forcibly displaced in that year. 51 million. There were 16 million refugees in 2013. Those were not forcibly displaced. They were also given asylum in a third country. In 2013, 4.5 million students studied in a university outside of their passport country. 4 million Americans live and work outside the United States with their families. And that's just Americans, because there is diplomatic corps in every country, and there are missionaries and international business people who represent many, many different places. So this number, the best estimates, no one has a real grasp of it, but the best estimate of that number of people who live and work outside of their passport country is 220 million people worldwide. Pico Iyer, in his TED Talk last year, said that that number is equivalent to the 5th largest nation in the world. And since 64 million people join that group every year, in just a few years, that number will outpace the United States and be a larger country than our country. People living outside of their passport country. That is enormous, isn't it? That's a huge mission field. So what does that look like in the United States? Well, I have some numbers. These are from 2012. I know it's hard to read the graphic, but you'll get the point. On the left-hand side are the temporary visas that were issued in 2012. There was over 600,000. Those are primarily to short-term workers. So you get 3 to 7 years on that visa. And you have to have a different visa for your family. So that includes the worker and all their family members. And then on the right-hand side, in 2012, there were 1 million permanent visas given out. Of those 1 million permanent visas, 105,000 were to refugees. That's less than 10% of the total number of visas we give out every year are given to refugees. Okay? The vast majority of internationals that live in the United States speak English, have an education, and a job. All right? So that's who we're talking about here. The number of visas that we give to refugees is actually trending downward, not upward. Now, in other countries, when international people congregate together, they typically gather in a small enclave in a city, and they speak in English. So it's easy to pick them out because they're not speaking French or Hindi or any of the other local languages. They're speaking in English. Guess what? When they come to America, what language do you suppose they speak? English, because English is the language of international business. So it's a little harder to pick these people out. There are 7 types of internationals or newcomers that live in the United States. Okay, this is the note-taking part for those of you who are note-takers. All right, the first group are international students, people who are studying at university. Do we have any international students this morning? I know there are some at Spring Arbor. Yay, okay. So international students are university students who are studying outside their passport country. And believe it or not, on the recent webinar that I was on, more than half of the churches participating in that webinar had ministries to international students. It's a strategic ministry location. It's strategic people. So it's a very good thing. The second group of types of internationals is illegal aliens. I know, you all immediately had a picture in your mind of who that might be. Do I look like an illegal alien to you? Well, my husband, my daughter, and I overstayed our visa in the Netherlands, and we were illegal immigrants in that country for 2 years. Maybe that will change some of your stereotypes of what that looks like. But we did it so that we could do ministry, so that makes it okay, right? The third group is adult third culture kids. Now, these are your missionary kids. I don't fall in that group, but it also includes your diplomatic corps and your military brats. I'm an Army brat, so I fill that post as well. So the third group is adult third culture kids. These kids are positioned to know a lot of people around the world. It is also a strategic ministry. The fourth group of internationals that you can reach out to are international visitors. Okay, here's an easy question. How many of you have ever been outside the borders of the United States? Yay, a vast majority. Good, so you've been this person. But when people come to the U.S., sometimes they're visiting as tourists and sometimes they're visiting for business. There's lots of reasons people travel. But imagine a ministry focused on international visitors. That's also very important. The fifth group of people are international business people. These are your expats. You ever hear that term and not know what it means? What is an expatriate? Do they not love their country anymore? It just means they live outside their country, but they intend to return home. So they're not permanent immigrants. They might be gone for 3, 7, 20 years. These are very, very highly educated people and very well-connected people and people involved in great international business, large international businesses. They're also diplomats, missionaries, and military. So I've been in that group too. All right, and number 6 is refugees and asylum seekers. That's another group of internationals and newcomers to the United States, and probably the most visible one outside of university students. The 7th group is ethnic enclaves. Now, if you can remember, well, maybe we can't all do this together, but as people move, we like to be around people that smell like us and eat like us and talk like us, right? So when we lived in the Netherlands, we hung out in the American neighborhood. Yeah, It was called Wassenaar. And we would hang out there with people or in Leidschendam, and we would do things that you did in America, like put on a play or a musical or do those sorts of things together. So ethnic enclaves are another opportunity, give you an opportunity to reach out and minister to people from a different country. So all of that to say, there are a huge diversity of different types of people on the move. They don't all fit into one category. But here's the thing. God has always made room for the alien, the stranger, the foreigner, or as we say now in intercultural studies, the newcomer, right? It's even in the Levitical law. It's even in the Great Commission. It's even in Revelation. So from the beginning of the Bible to the end of the Bible, God cares very much about people who are moving internationally and across cultures. So what do I do with that, you ask me? And so we will talk about things in us, the roadblocks first. Before we get to what we do, let's talk about first what we undo. So the first thing that we can have some assumptions that hinder us. And the first assumption I hear a lot is, well, they have their culture, but we're just normal here. Oh, come on, more of you have thought that than what just laughed. All right, so let's try a little exercise, all right? How many of you have heard of Johnny Appleseed? Let's see, show hands. All right, from my elementary school years, I'm going to say the lyrics, you finish them. Ready? Johnny Appleseed, he was quite a guy, a hero guaranteed, as American as... How did you all know how that ended? That was like my 4th grade play in elementary school. You know how it ended because he's a legend, right? And in countries, we use literature to communicate what? Values, what we value. And Johnny Appleseed is no less of a legend for that reason. What did he do? He struck out on his own into a wilderness territory, right? He moved west and he planted apple seeds as he went. Alone, out in the wilderness. And then he would circle back sometimes and talk to the people and check on his apple trees and make sure that they were growing well and maybe plant some more seeds. But what does Johnny Appleseed communicate to us about our culture? 1, we go it alone. We take on very tough challenges, but we don't do it in groups. And we leave the world a little better than the way we found it. Right? Those are very American values. They are not universal values. Now, our culture is the glass that we look through to interpret the world. It's important that we have one. I'm not telling you that it is evil to have a culture. I'm telling you it is normal. But we need to remember that we have it and not just gloss over this part. I have a friend who was running a mother's group for international women in Philadelphia. And one morning, a Japanese mother who had a daughter in kindergarten came in and was furious and very uncharacteristically was complaining quite loudly about how the American school was brainwashing her child. She was very serious. And my friend asked her what had happened, and she said, the teacher told my kid to come home, I'm sure she didn't say it that way, to come home, choose an object, and then she's going to stand in front of the class in the place where the teacher stands and explain why the object matters to her. And she was very offended. What activity am I talking about? Show and tell. We say show and tell is all about public speaking, but it's not just about public speaking, is it? It's communicating that a child's opinions matter as much as an adult's opinions. Think about that. It's communicating that opinion is important to be discussed. It's communicating that peer review is important and independent thinking. Those are values that we inculcate our children with from the very lowest levels of education all the way to the highest. And we need to recognize that these are cultural values. They're not Christian values. They're not worldwide values. They're not universal. Just being aware that that's what they are is all the first assumption is about. So we just need to be aware. So what does a culture do? What's the purpose of culture? Culture does two things. It answers two questions. One, what it means to be human in this place and this time. And two, culture defines for us what it means to live the good life. Okay, that's going to vary from place to place and how you were raised. Okay, sorry, I wanted to branch off there, but I will stick to my notes. Okay, assumptions that hinder. The second assumption is that we don't have anything in common with anybody else. Ever feel that way? Because, I mean, come on. Some of the food smells really different, right? And let's talk about wardrobe. Well, one day, my husband was in a church van full of luggage. They were on a missions trip, and there were two vans, and he got elected to ride in the luggage van. So everybody else on the team was in the front van, and he was in the following van with the driver and the luggage. And they had this long conversation all the way to the airport about the man's situation. And he was explaining that his brother had died. And he had decided to adopt his two nieces. And this was a big deal because he already had two daughters. And he and his wife, she didn't have a real job. She was doing hair in their house, but in helping bring income that way, but it wasn't a real job. And he was concerned about schooling for these girls. He wasn't sure that the local school would adequately prepare them for university. So he was thinking about sending them to Christian school and what that would cost them and how they would make those transitions and all of those things. And when they got to the airport in Nairobi, Eric said goodbye to the man and told him he would pray for him faithfully. And he has. But that father lives in the Kibera slums in Kenya. You tell me he has nothing in common with you? When I speak to mothers groups, whether that's expat women at a women's conference in Frankfurt, Germany, where they're concerned about their sending their kids to university from the international baccalaureate schools, and one of the mothers was crying and in tears, frustrated because she couldn't get her son a recommendation letter because they were Christians, and the school wouldn't, or the particular guidance counselor wouldn't write the letter because of that. Thought they weren't academically inclined. Or whether I'm in San Pedro Sula talking to mothers who have a second grade education at best, struggling to keep their kids in kindergarten, first and second grade. It doesn't matter where in the world I am. I can connect with another mother because I have to get my three daughters out the door to school in the morning. And it isn't easy for me either. It doesn't matter because we're human and we're created in the image of God. And we work and we struggle and we face challenges and we love people and we have a lot in common with others. We're going to skip the third one. And the fourth one is the idea that the American church is the parent church. And I already let the secret out in first hour, so I'm sure it's gone around like wildfire already. The church has been around for something like 2,000 years. Is that right? Is my math right? I'm not a math major. Was that right? Okay. America's been around for how long? Like 200 years? Jesus wasn't American. I know, some of you are shocked. He was a Jewish boy and he ate kosher food and he walked around the countryside with his buddies and sometimes they slept outside. This is not necessarily the part of the life I want to model. Sleeping outside, especially. Who votes for that tonight, right? No, none of us are going to do that. We don't want to jump in that boat. But this is perhaps the most difficult assumption that we carry in our hearts. Because let's face it, we are individualists. Our country loves and celebrates the individual. And at the end of the day, don't you all know that if they consulted you and your best friend, you could solve all the world's problems? Right? How many times have you worked it out over coffee? You have. I know you have, because I've done the same thing. And so it's very easy to carry this idea that we have all the right answers. But this is very dangerous when you're working across cultures. I have to make sure that I'm not approaching the other person as wrong. For me, this is very difficult across socioeconomic lines or educational lines to not assume that the other person is inherently wrong and that my way is the best way or the only way. I struggle with this one. This one's hard. It's difficult to live out, but it is important to at least recognize that the assumption is there and that it's wrong. Because this attitude demands respect, and I never see Jesus demanding respect from anyone. When I interact with someone from another culture, I try to observe what they are doing and then repeat it. So let me tell you how this worked out for me. First, I have to go back to college. I hate coffee. How many of you college students love coffee? Let's hear it. I don't want to see it. Hear it. Come on. Yeah. How many of you couldn't get through the week without, or an exam, studying for exams without coffee? Right, okay, all right, so I've got some affirmation there. I can't stand coffee. I'm so sorry. I tried. Believe me, I tried. My best friend and I went to a coffee shop when we were in college, and we put half of the mug was filled with chocolate syrup. Okay, and just a tiny bit of coffee. And I probably paid $5 or $6 for that coffee back then, and I couldn't finish the cup. I had to pour it out. I'm sorry, I just don't drink coffee. But so when we were in the Netherlands, we were there for like a day and a half, and our neighbor invited me for coffee. Yay! We're there to connect with people over coffee. So she served me a demi-tasse, and I thought, okay, I'm loading this thing up with sugar. And I drank that thing. And even though it made me sick to my stomach, and I thought I was going to throw up the whole time, we had a lovely conversation, and it built the opportunity to have a friendship with her. And the reason I bring that up is because oftentimes the things we need to do to cross a culture or to make a relationship with someone else will make us very uncomfortable. I did not become a coffee drinker. I still don't drink the coffee. And later it became a joke in our friendship. She's like, how did you even manage that? I know you only drink tea. She said, I would have made you tea. But I wanted to honor her more than I wanted her to honor me. And that's super important when you're crossing cultures. We need to be aware of who else is in the room. What do? Do they greet by shaking hands, by hugging, by a peck on the cheek? How do they sit? Do they sit in chairs, or are you supposed to sit on the floor? Just being aware of what people are doing. I tell you what, very rarely, if you're a visitor, very rarely are you the most important in the room. You're honored as a visitor. But usually, the most important person in the room is the one everyone else waits for when they ask a question. And it's very rarely you. Just saying, from my experience. So this is the one attitude that can be the most damaging when we perpetuate it. Because we remember, God so loved the world. God so loved the world. And in Revelation, he says, who will be in heaven? Every tribe, every tongue, every nation. We don't all suddenly speak the same language. Every tongue. Do you notice that that's in there? That's in there for a reason. It's not just us. We don't have a lock on the gospel. One culture is no more important than any other in heaven. And let's just be honest and frank for a minute. How many of you have seen MTV lately? Or any television program at all? How about anybody see any commercials on this week at all? There's advertising a specific movie I'm thinking of. Yes, I heard the giggles. Okay, in state-sponsored religion, in countries that have state-sponsored religions, whether that's Europe or the Middle East, it is very difficult to take apart the culture and the religion. They equate them. So if our number one export is our entertainment industry, and it is, That is what is representing Christianity, American Christianity, to the rest of the world. And I don't think they want that influencing their churches. We need to be humble when we approach another Christian from another culture, because that is how they are perceiving us. Okay, lecture's over. Now we talk about moving forward. Okay, how do we move forward? The first way we move forward is just ask yourself a bunch of questions. If you're not already into this, it's very, very informative. So ask yourself, David Livermore says, who is your other? He wrote a book called Cultural Intelligence, among others. I highly recommend this one. Who is your other? And your other is that person that if you had to drive for half an hour with them in the car, you would be white-knuckled and struggling, right? You're thinking, okay, the fruits of the Spirit are peace, patience, gentleness, kindness. Okay, that's your other. If you've got that, some of you already know who that is for you. Okay, so we need to know who that person is. Then ask yourself, why is my way right? Is it because I have always done it that way? What's the reason I think this way is the only right way? I know that's hard. And then consider what the implicit and explicit messages are in the communication that you have, right? So we have talked about media, brushed it over, but Van Hooser says in Everyday Theology, this is important and it's communicated in restaurants. So how many of you have eaten in a restaurant in America? Come on, more than that, more than 18, come on. How many of you have eaten in a restaurant in America where you sat down and there was a server, right? How long did it take them to refill your water? Did you even notice, or did they do it before you asked? How long did it take them to bring you the bill? Did they do it before you asked, just at the right time? Or did you have to ask for it a couple of times? See, the restaurant experience in America is all about a business communicating to you their efficiency. They want you there, but they want to show you how efficient they are. And the more efficient they are, the better we tip, right? In Europe, how many of you have ever had coffee in a coffee shop or coffee house outside of America? All right. When you sat down at the table, did it take a while for the person to show up to take your order? Yes, yes it did. And they served you one cup, right? They didn't keep refilling it. They served you one of your drink. And then how long did it take to find the person to bother to bring you the bill? Don't they want to get paid? Did you ask yourself that? Why? Why is it different? Are they not efficient? No, it's not about efficiency. They're communicating to you that life is lived outside of your home, in community. And so they are honoring your conversation and your relationship. So they're communicating something very different in the same kind of business. So what messages are we communicating in how we are acting towards others? I know, we could spend a whole weekend just talking about that one. So I want to encourage you to try something new. Trying something new means you have to become a learner, right? And what do babies do? We had a baby here this morning. Does he mimic things, right? In our family, my husband's extended family, the coolest thing you can do with a new baby is to take them in your arms and lick them like this and go, stick your little tongue out at them until they stick their little tongue out back. And then when they do it, you just get so happy. Oh, aren't you so cute? You just did that. You copied me. And then the baby, it won't take you very long. If you try this, borrow someone's kid. Try it. When you do that, after you do it a couple of times, the baby will stick their tongue out at you and wants you to imitate them. We are born to mimic, and that's what this first style of learning is. Observe and repeat. It's Albert Bandura's social learning theory, if you want to read more about it. The second model of learning is the apprentice model. This is when a new person, like in a knitting circle, is the example given by Levin Wagner in their book, Situated Learning. The example is a person who is new at knitting and they don't know a thing. So they come into the group and they sit in the circle right next to somebody who was new not too long ago, and that person teaches them the first stitch. And then as they master the first stitch, when somebody new comes in, they have to teach it. So they're learning from those who've gone before, and they're teaching the new people. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Maybe not in knitting, because I don't knit either, but maybe you've been in a discipleship modeling class, right? Where you've had to learn from someone who's a little farther along, and then your intended is to bring someone along with you. Yeah, so we do these things already. The last one is to become a cultural broker. This is David Pollock and Ruth Van Rieken's model in Growing Up Among Worlds, which is a book about third culture kids. And the idea of being a cultural broker is being a bridge builder. Okay, this is the person that says, all right, I know you came from the 1040 window with all those lovely tropical summers, but in winter, we have to wear boots, not flip-flops, or your toes will literally fall off. Sometimes we need to explain things like that. Sometimes it's simple business courtesy, things we do, like writing a thank you note to the person that interviews you after you have an interview. It's just things that we know to do that someone from our culture may not know to do. So we are going to go back to the first slide. Sorry. I want to get back to this one. You may not have guessed this yet, but I'm just going to tell you I'm not a Greek scholar. So, as I was preparing for this morning, I went to Blue Letter Bible and I looked up this verse in Blue Letter Bible. And I am really sorry to tell you that the word "and" means "and." It's the word "kai," and it means "and." So when he says, "And you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Samaria, and in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth," he means "and." So what do I mean by that? The first 20 years I read this verse, I read, okay, you people over here, you're the ones in Jerusalem. You've all seen Jesus, the ascension, all that. And so you are going to be your witnesses. And you right there, you're going to Jerusalem. And you over here, you're Judea. You got Samaria, and the rest of you guys ends of the earth. That's how I read this verse. But channel your southern person with me. I'm going to read it a different way now. But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, also in Judea, even Samaria, indeed to the ends of the earth. Oh wait, I left out the most important part. And y'all will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, also in Judea, even Samaria, indeed to the ends of the earth. We're individualists, right? We read individuals into everything that we read. But this is a collective you. The job of the church together at the same time is to be witnesses right here in Spring Arbor, in all of Michigan, even the Buckeyes in Ohio, and indeed to the ends of the earth. That's the challenge that I leave you with today. It's an "and," not an "or." However, you have a distinct advantage over generations in the past. You need not pack your belongings and head out on a ship. All you have to do is go to a local restaurant or a grocery store or connect with someone on the internet. And